representing the City of Farmers Branch. Also with the agency tonight out front, it's okay, you can take it. Out front we had Emily Lindley, she's with our intergovernmental staff, she was helping people sign in. Jeff Holdery, who's actually out there, he is the team leader with Municipal Solid Permitting, he's waving here. We also have Jim Fernandez, he's doing sound tonight, he works with me. We have from our region staff, we have Sam Barrett, Alyssa Taylor, Aaron Gorman, Mike Delaney, Kendra Wright, Jeff Tate. I think that's everybody, is it? They're all with the Dallas-Fort Worth Regional Office. And also we have Andrea Morrow, who's with our agency communications. I'd also like to introduce tonight and welcome, we have State Representative Bert Solomons. We also have Nicole Black is here. She's here on behalf of Senator Nelson, Senator Nelson's office. With the City of Carrollton, we have Mayor Matthew Marchant. Mayor Pro Tem and City Councilman Jeff Andonian. Councilwoman Lisa Sutter. Councilman Terry Simmons. Councilman Doug Herbisek. Councilman Anthony Wilder. I have the Honorable Neil Ferguson with the City of Lewisville. And that is all that I caught from the sign-in sheets. Do I have any other elected officials? Do you want to state your name? Just state your name in the mic real quick.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Kevin Falconer.
Thank you. Is there someone else?
Over here.
Yes.
City Councilman Bob Garza.
Thank you.
John Goretta, City of Lewisville City Council.
Leroy Vaughn, City of Lewisville City Council.
Anyone else? Okay. We had some agendas out there. I think we ran out before everyone got one. I wanted to go over the format of the meeting real quickly. We're going to have some presentations. Britt Ryan's going to explain what the applicant is asking for with this application. Dwight will explain what the agency looks at during the technical review. And then Diane Goss will explain where we are procedurally with this application. Then we're going to open it up for question and answer. And that will be your opportunity to ask a question either of the applicant or the TCEQ. And in order for everybody to be able to hear, and because we are recording this meeting, if you have a question, I'm going to ask you to have to come down front to this microphone and speak into the microphone. If somebody, these stairs are quite steep, if somebody can't make it down the stairs and has a question, please let us know, and somehow we'll figure out how to relay that question down to us. After Q&A, we'll take a break, and we're going to do the formal portion of the meeting. When you signed in, people indicated whether or not they want to give a formal comment on this application, and that's your opportunity to do that orally into the mic. It's the equivalent of submitting something in writing. What Diane will explain and what I'll say and what we'll continue to stress is that this application is still under review. The comment period remains open. If you don't give a comment tonight, you will have an opportunity to continue to do so. Before we get into Q&A, Representative Solomons would like to say a few words.
Really, all I really wanted to do was thank the commission for sending their people out to listen. These people, this is a very big deal here. Very big deal for the City of Carrollton and Lewisville. It is something that we really need you to pay attention to, and I'm sure you will. I know there's a lot of parameters that you all have, but the end result is when the City of Farmers Branch, our neighbor, actually is asking for a triple their size for their landfill, not only in height, but with massive depth. That's not just an amendment, and that's just, to me, that's just not a modification. That's not something that the community may have a few comments on. You can probably tell from the turnout here, you could have a turnout here almost every week, and you get this kind of turnout. These people are very upset about what's going on with this, that they feel that they are being put upon and will have very little input to you for some reason. And I know that you all want to listen to them, and that you will consider what they're going to say. But anyway, I'm glad we called the hearing, and that you guys came out here and do it at a time when a lot of folks who care can come out. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So before we get into Q&A, we'll do our short presentation. So Brent Ryan will be first, and he'll speak on behalf of the applicant.
Thanks, Tara. First, I want to thank you for your warm welcome. I do want to tell you that we appreciate so many people turning out here to find out what it is we're actually proposing to do. I'm not going to take too much time, but I do want to go through and explain several aspects of the permit application that Farmers Branch has filed for an amendment to the TCEQ permit for the Camelot Landfill. Camelot Landfill is one of 3 TCEQ permitted landfills located in Lewisville, the other 2 being the Lewisville Landfill that is located north of Business 121, and the DFW Landfill, which is located just off Hebron Parkway, and which is the largest of the 3 landfills. The currently permitted area for the Camelot Landfill is 351 acres, shaped almost like a square, within which approximately 198 acres are authorized for use for waste disposal purposes. The entrance to the Camelot Landfill is on Huffines Boulevard, approximately 1,800 feet south of Business 121, south of the industrial park and recycled concrete operations that are located up there. The permit for the Camelot Landfill was issued to the City of Farmers Branch by the Texas Department of Health in 1979, and the landfill began operating in the early 1980s. As part of this permit amendment application, Farmers Branch is proposing to add to the permitted boundary for the landfill a 100-acre piece of property to the north. This property was previously owned by the City of Highland Park and is also permitted for use as a landfill, but Farmers Branch is not proposing to expand the waste disposal area of the Camelot Landfill onto this tract. This tract will be used for new entrance facilities to the landfill, a stormwater detention pond, and operations support, and a wood waste processing area. The current waste disposal area at Camelot is shaped sort of like a hand with the thumb sticking out. The amendment proposes to remove all of the waste previously deposited in the part of the landfill that's nearest to the residential areas to the east. That's essentially the end of the thumb. And then to square off that remaining notched area there by adding about 38 additional acres to the waste disposal area, all of which will be on the interior of the site and farther from residential areas than the current disposal area at the landfill. Also, the interior portions of the landfill will extend higher. The current authorized fill height of the landfill is about 160 feet above the natural ground surface, which corresponds to an elevation of 523 feet above mean sea level. Under the permit application, the fill height would go up another 202 feet, all of that in the interior areas of the site. The Camelot landfill is fully compliant with the new stricter federal standards for municipal solid waste landfills, known as the Subtitle D rules, and every aspect of the expansion will meet or exceed those requirements. As part of those requirements, municipal landfills must have a landfill gas monitoring system and a series of shallow groundwater wells for sampling and testing groundwater around the landfill, which Camelot has had in place since the 1980s. In 2004, the landfill gas monitoring system detected low levels of landfill gas in the soils around the landfill, and at several times, samples from a few of the groundwater monitoring wells have shown low concentrations of 3 constituents that are commonly found at landfills as a result of landfill gas. Farmers Branch has worked with TCEQ to address these sampling results primarily by installing and then twice expanding a landfill gas collection system that operates inside the landfill. That system consists of approximately 100 wells that collect the gas produced from decomposition that occurs inside the landfill, and that gas is piped to a waste-to-energy facility that's located near the southwest corner of the Camelot site, where it is used to produce electricity. The entire Camelot landfill is underlain by the very tight, low permeability Eagle Ford shale formation. And the excavation sidewalls at the landfill have recompacted clay liners that provide a secure containment system for the waste material inside the landfill. In addition, most of the disposal area has HDPE plastic liners and additional recompacted clay liners. The final thing I want to mention is that the permit amendment application includes a slurry wall, which is a trench that is excavated down through the surface soils just outside the landfill, all the way down into the shale layer. That trench is then backfilled with a mixture of bentonite clay and soil, and it creates an additional very low permeability barrier around the landfill. Farmers Branch has decided to go ahead and get started on installation of that slurry wall, and even though it is a part of this permit amendment application, we will actually be submitting to TCEQ in the next week or two the paperwork seeking authorization to get started on installation of that slurry wall. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Dwight will explain what it is he looks at when as he's reviewing the application.
Thank you, Derek. Can everybody hear me okay? Again, my name is Dwight Russell, and I'm the project engineer on this application. And our review team, again, is Diane Goss is the legal counsel, Fred Myers is the geologist, and I'm the project manager. When an application is received at the TCEQ, it goes through an administrative review first, which goes through the entire application and looks for all the major parts that are supposed to be there. And once that's finished, we enter the technical review process. And that's where we are now. We're in the middle of the technical review process. The purpose of the technical review is to ensure that the application is compliant with all the applicable rules. Most of the rules reside in our Title 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 330 and Chapter 305. What's involved in the technical process is to review the application. We issued 1 or 2 comment letters where we ask for additional information that we deem necessary. There's public participation. If the application is deemed to meet the applicable requirements of our rules, then we declare it technically complete. Now, the application is actually sitting up here. It's composed of 6 volumes. It's all applications are composed of 4 parts primarily. There's parts 1 and 2, which have mostly siting issues, land use issues. Part 3 is the site development plan, which contains all the engineering plans and specifications for how the landfill will be built. Then part 4 is the site operating plan, which is a comprehensive plan on how it will be operated. Some of the major areas that we review that are in the application are, again, land use. There's location requirements, site geologic conditions, hydrologic conditions, landfill design, stormwater collection and drainage, landfill gas management, site operation, and any special circumstances that are inherent to the site. Now, to maintain consistency among all of us reviewers, we have a checklist which is proposed, which identifies all the rules that are applicable. We have template letters that we use for writing our correspondence. We have guidance documents and procedures, and all of these things are on our website if people are interested. Now, specifically, this application was received on March 30th of this year. It was declared administratively complete on April 6th. And we are in the technical review. We've issued one comment letter and are awaiting the applicant's response. And we've got a little more stuff to talk about, and then we'll answer some questions on this.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it down to Diane. Diane is the attorney with the agency, and she'll explain where we are procedurally with this application and where we have to go.
Good evening. As Dwight mentioned, the administrative review concluded, and currently we are in the technical review of this application. At conclusion of administrative review, a notice of receipt and intent to obtain a permit is provided to the public, published in the newspaper by the applicant and mailed to persons on the mailing list or persons within a certain distance of the proposed facility. And so the NORI notice is our acronym for it. NORI is the notice that some of the responses we got included the request for this public meeting. And the NORI provides a location where the application is available for review and copying at a local, usually at a local library. It invites the public to submit comments on the application until the end of the comment period. It invites the public to request a public meeting or to request a contested case hearing. And there are several notices throughout this application review process that continue to invite participation at these areas. The next notice that came on this application was the notice of the public meeting. It's why you're here and the rest of the good get out the community efforts that you all have made. Now, these public comments that are invited to be submitted on this application may be submitted in writing by mail, in person at the TCEQ main office in North Austin, or by e-comment through the TCEQ website. It's important to include the name of the facility and the permit number, and on an MSW permit such as this, the letter suffix B at the end of the permit in order to make sure that your comment is considered for this application. Public meetings are held if they're requested by a member of the legislature who represents the general area where the application affects, or if there's substantial public interest in the application, which is defined in the rules. At the conclusion of technical review, there will be another notice, which will be the notice of application and preliminary decision. If the executive director's staff, that's a white, determines that the application does meet the rules and requirements, a draft permit will be added to the materials in the library where the application is available, and the NAPI notice will be published in the newspaper and mailed to all persons on the list. The end of the comment period will be triggered by when the applicant publishes the notice of the NAPI, that final notice, and that will be available on the TCEQ website at the time that the applicant's proof of publication is received. All public comments need to be received before midnight on the final day at the end of the comment period in order for them to be considered. Staff, the executive director's staff, considers all public comments received on the application. Additionally, we will publish a document called the response to comments, in which we will discuss all comments received, and we will consider them and discuss whether or not they're relevant material to the application, if so, what rules apply, and if necessary, make any changes to the permit, draft permit at that time in response to those comments. The other thing that's important about the comments is that the final process for public to participate in the application such as this is to request a contested case hearing. And in order to participate in a contested case hearing, there's two parts. The person who requests to participate in a contested case hearing must be an affected person, and that is defined in the rules, in our rules, and there's a lot of information about that on our website. And it has to be, the comments were raised during the comment period, they're addressed in the response to comments. Relevant material comments that were raised must be included in the person's request for a hearing, and then make the case to the agency that they're an affected person. So this meeting is being held during technical review, so we do not know yet the end of the comment period. And when we do have the end of the comment period, it will be included information about the application. And finally, there is a link on our website, the TCEQ website, to all pending MSW applications. And if you go to the TCEQ website and if you enter the applicant's name, you can quickly find that page where you can link to electronic copies so you don't have to go to the library to review the application. And I'll be available to answer other questions at the question and answer.
Thank you. Now is the opportunity to ask questions either of the applicant or the TCEQ. So if anyone has a question, if I could get you to step up to the microphone, everybody just kind of step up.
Hello, good evening. My name is Jeff Antonian. I am the Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Carrollton. I'm also a geologist, as Fred is here. I guess for the audience purpose, what we're discussing during this session, or this section, is not being recorded, correct?
It's being recorded, but it's not considered a formal oral comment. It won't be, this part of the meeting is question and answer. It is being recorded, but it won't be considered part of the formal portion of the meeting where you state your comment orally for the record, and it will eventually be responded to in the written response to comments.
Very good. My question will be directed to Fred, a fellow geologist. Fred, over the past year and a half, I've attended quarterly landfill meetings, and at those meetings was the City of Farmers Branch, their representative, and also their partner at their waste facilities, Camelot waste facilities, Republic Services. Now, my questions have been centered mostly around the multiple wells that are all around Camelot Landfill, the groundwater monitoring wells, and how there has been repeated hits or recordings of contamination in those wells, in the groundwater, in the pre-subtitle D, and also hits in the subtitle D, which is supposed to be the most robust area. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the pre-subtitle D has 2 foot of compacted clay on the sides, correct? As a liner? That's true. And then the more robust or more modern part of the landfill has the compacted clay and a geomembrane, correct?
Yes, along the floor and the side.
Which is about 60 mils or the thickness of a stick of Wrigley's gum. Anyhow, my question is that I've asked Farmers Branch at multiple meetings, I've asked the question, how does contaminants migrate or move outside of a lined landfill? How does it go past that barrier? In order to go past the barrier is there to protect any type of leakage, correct? That means the barrier must have failed somewhere, correct? I mean, it gets to the other side somehow.
It gets to the other side somehow. What the exact mechanism is, that remains unclear.
But it has passed the barrier. So the barrier hasn't done its job.
It appears so, yes.
Okay, so the barrier hasn't done its job. The other question, the gentleman over here mentioned the fact that, yes, the landfill does sit on Eagle Ford Shale, and shales, as most shales are fairly impermeable. However, shales are also fissile, and in the southern portion of the subtitle D portion of Camelot, we noticed a plume of contamination hits, correct? Like a big nose coming towards the Elm Fork, is that correct?
Yes,
Can shales have fractures in it?
shales can have fractures.
And so they're fissile on the layers on the beds. So liquid can migrate through fractures, correct?
There's plenty of evidence out there to show that it has in the past.
And-
Not at this site or at other sites.
In general.
In general.
Now, the other thing that Farmers Branch has been insistent that their landfill hasn't leaked, and that none of the contamination in the wells are anywhere near the Trinity River. However, they have all the way to the tree line of the Trinity River gas monitoring probes, which they admitted last landfill meeting that it has picked up minor hits of contamination. So that means something must have migrated, correct? In order that far out. And I have one last question.
Okay,
One last question. TCEQ, their more robust monitoring wells are 600 feet apart, correct, at a landfill?
that's correct.
So that's like lining 2 football fields end to end on each other. Within that length, as a geologist, I'm asking you, if a monitoring well is at one goal post and the other monitoring well at the other goal post, 600 foot apart, can a fluid migrate in between them and not be detected?
This is a hypothetical.
Well, I mean, I can tell you
Yes,
as
it's a very simple question, and the statement, there can be some truth in that, yes, but the way that we have the point of compliance set up and the spacing of the wells is 600 feet. Until there's other evidence to show that that spacing is inadequate, then we would come in and require the owner-operator to go ahead and fill those spaces as required.
So it is possible that it can slip between 600 feet. I mean, I can tell you a lot of wells that I drilled were, there were 2 dry holes 600 feet apart, and we did find oil in between, and there was no sign of, no shows of oil in either of those. So in the same thought process, oil is a liquid, water is a liquid, and water-bearing contamination can migrate. So that's our concern there. We're at the tree level of the Trinity River, and we have traces of contamination there. My concern is not just them wanting to expand the landfill. My concern is, have they been a good operator of the existing landfill? And my concern is the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, not only in Carrollton and Lewisville, but it's a regional issue for the whole Trinity aquifer. I think what's going on. Branch needs to decide that the actions that we take today will not only affect our citizens today, but our children and our grandchildren and well into the 22nd century. The actions that elected officials and governmental agencies. Farmers Branch should not behave as a pariah to the civilized folks along the Trinity aquifer. Thank you.
I live in Carrollton. Got a couple of questions, one for the TCEQ and one for Mr. Bird over there. Camelot's proposed height is about 360 feet above the surface of the landfill. Are there any other landfills in Texas that are at that height or greater than that height? And the reason I ask that question is, how can we be assured that the liner system, with all the force and pressure at that height, will be able to withstand those forces, given the unique geology in North Texas?
For the first part of the question, my understanding is it's going to be about 275 feet above the surrounding grade. Anyway,
Well, it was, I think you explained before, they're at 170 feet above grade and wanted to add an additional 200. Now, maybe he was wrong. I came in with different notes, but then changed them when I heard Bert. So maybe he needs to explain what the maximum permitted height they're proposing is.
You want to clarify, Brent, maximum, what, the height?
The maximum height that's being proposed in the permit application is 725 feet above mean sea level, which is 202 feet above the currently permitted height of 523 feet. And if you look along, I think the lowest area of
Like
natural
450.
grade out there is somewhere around 460 down along the southeast side of the landfill.
Okay. So instead of 360, let me pull it back 100 feet. And are there any landfills that are 260 feet high or more?
Jeff, do you know the answer, just in general?
I can't tell you that there are specific names of landfills that are above that height, but I do know that landfills generally will go 200-300 feet above existing grade. I don't believe that this is the one that's the policy.
And how do we find this out? I went on the TCEQ website, and there's no information showing height of landfills. It just shows acreage, it shows years to fill and that sort of thing, but nothing showing the height. And the concern is, if the landfill is so high and the pressure on those liner systems, that what evidence is there that we have that other landfills have behaved properly with that height?
Dwight, you want to explain when they ask for height, the grade, the slope, what goes into consideration of allowing them to go that height?
Well, I can tell you that the application contains extensive engineering calculations to demonstrate that the strength of the pipes, the liner, mainly the leachate pipes and the liner will withstand the pressure of the entire weight of the landfill.
Yeah, I understand these calculations. I was just hoping there was some real-world evidence that that's the case. Anyway, my next question. And this is towards Farmers Branch. Does the permit include any site operating plans that differ than our current site operating plans, including operating hours, daily cover requirements, or special waste exceptions? I didn't read all 3 bindings, by the way.
Well, then I'll start off my answer by saying that the definitive answers to your questions are in the application that's available online or at the library. I don't recall any significant differences with regard to those items that you mentioned. Differences between the current site operating plan and the one proposed in the amendment application.
Is there anybody here in attendance that can answer that question?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My voice would be different from any other person because I'm in Texas and we have accent. Thank you. I'm going to begin with Farmers Branch representative. So, how far do you live from the landfill?
I think I live about 208 miles from the landfill.
You will never understand what we're going through, but I make my point. I'm also happy to have the representatives that we elect here. As you know, this is election year, so what you do today is very important. Now, so the officers on my right, you made several points that I listened to. And one thing I didn't hear is you keep talking about meeting requirements. What is the purpose of the invitation of these people here? Why are we here? Where do we fit in your consideration? To make your decision today or in the future, why did you invite us? What impact do we have?
We held the meeting because Senator Jane Nelson and State Representative Bert Solomons requested the meeting, and because we had what we call significant public interest. We had many, many requests to have a public meeting so that people could come and ask questions of the applicant or of the TCEQ. Your role here tonight, the application is under technical review, and we welcome and we want you to submit comments, not only your personal feelings about the application, but perhaps you could, that you might bring to light, you might make a formal comment that brings to light some issue that we were not aware of,
Okay.
based on the technical aspects of the application.
Okay. I'm going to conclude and allow another person to come in. I'm a victim, number one. I want you to record that. I've lost my first home right at Hebron by Trinity Rivers. That house I moved in 1996. I built the house. 3 years later, we couldn't stay there because of the bad odor coming out from the landfill. It gets worse. It gets worse when the weather gets cold. For one reason or the other, you, the experts, can tell me what is going on. The reason I began with you, sir, when I asked you how far do you live from the landfill, you will never understand. If you're a woman and you've never been pregnant, you will not understand what it takes to have a baby. And that's what we're going through. So I want you to pay attention because you don't live close, please. So I've lost my first house. The value of my house when I moved in there was $185,000. Today it is $96,000. And no one wants to buy it because everyone knows how bad the neighborhood is because of the landfill. And here you are again trying to build another mountain behind that house. Sir, he said, no, 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 thank you.
He actually asked the question I was going to because I thought we were coming here, the intent is to have a huge turnout, which we have, and I thought we were signing petitions. We're not. It's just signing information in case you want to get on the mailing list or find out what's going on. So 2 questions. If we don't increase Mountain Camelot, where does that waste go? Secondly, I do not know the value added that all these people took time out of their busy days to come here. Because if the application is technically correct, no matter what comments we put on the website, emotionally, technically, you say we may find a technical glitch they didn't know. It comes down to, if they're technically correct, and it doesn't matter what the voters and the people living in these homes, whose values of the homes are going to decrease, matter. So again, you need to be more clear, and farmers branch your care less. So you need to be more clear to us exactly tonight what the value of our time and our money and our taxes are to the passing of this application, you guys moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the question about where will the waste go, where will the waste be taken, what MSW landfill will solid waste that would go to Camelot if it's expanded after it reaches current capacity. I understand that I believe I don't know that much about the municipal solid waste landfills in this area, but I'm sure Sam Barrett and Jeff Holdery have more information on that than I do. But it will be an MSW landfill. We have MSW landfills throughout the state, and that is where waste is disposed. And I understand that the one across the river should reach capacity first before Camelot does. So I don't think that's the answer. So I don't have a good answer for you for the first part, but I'm going to try to address your second part a little bit. As a government employee, you know, we're involved in both rulemaking, policy. We, at the direction of the legislature, we enact rules, and we follow, generally we have to follow federal regulations when we enact those rules, and we do this in advance, we do this constantly. And there are a lot of places where public individuals and interest groups may participate in the process at TCEQ. And I understand that it does seem as if it's a needle in a haystack, and it can have no effect, particularly when you're up to the point where the landfill next door is capable of meeting the requirements and then having an amendment and having an expansion.
What did they already agree to on the, to move forward on the, sunshine word?
You mean, you were talking about the slurry wall?
Does anyone go ahead and go forward with that?
They would have to seek authorization to add the slurry wall. That could be done outside of this amendment, and it could be done as a part, I believe, as a part of the corrective action at the site for the groundwater. And it would be considered to be more protective, and so it would be subject to a different standard than an amendment is. But I guess there are a lot of places that individuals can participate in the process at TCEQ, including in the rulemaking process along as we go.
And that's too late for that. So I'm just saying. Microphone. Okay, I just so frustrated. I get that, but for now, and we can all join in the process, right? But for now, it's too late for that. This process is in movement, it's moving forward. So if everything is met and approved by the application by Farmers Branch, if every I is dotted and every T is crossed, and they've met everything, no matter how much we oppose that, do our valid and emotional comments make a difference?
We don't matter.
That's all. It doesn't matter.
I believe that the answer is that the permitting of waste management activities in the state of Texas is not subject to popular vote.
That's really.
I'm serious.
I'm glad to know that. As opposed to.
Super fun!
Let me try. So, I understand your frustration, and what we're here is to get your comment, and for you to give us your concerns and your comments on the application, how the application could impact the environment or human health. The other aspect of this, if this application moves forward and there is a draft permit, you can request what's called a contested case hearing. A contested case hearing is an evidentiary process before an administrative law judge at a different agency called the State Office of Administrative Hearings. You request that contested case hearing. Those hearing requests go before our three commissioners. They make a decision. The people that requested the hearing, are they directly impacted? The issues that they brought up, are they relevant material? Are they something that the agency has jurisdiction on? If the three commissioners agree to that, they refer it over to this other agency for a contested case hearing, which is similar to like going to district court. It's like a trial before an administrative law judge. You go through that process, the administrative law judge writes what's called a proposal for decision. The parties that participated in the hearing get to write their opinion of what the judge said. It comes back before the three commissioners. The three commissioners review that and then make a decision on the application. So there is an administrative process that continues on past this meeting. Yes, did you have a question?
My name is Emma and I am 8 years old. I have lived here my whole life. When my mom told me that you were making the landfill bigger, I couldn't understand why. Don't we have a recycling program here? Can't you work with them to bring down trash here? If you're supposed to protect our environment, why are you letting the trash take over part of our city?
Emma, those about your recycling question. Yes, there are a lot of recycling programs in this part of Texas. There are curbside recycling programs where people put their recyclables out at the curb, they get picked up to be recycled. There are drop-off locations where people can take recyclables to. But even with those recycling programs in place, there is an awful lot of waste that gets generated from houses, schools, restaurants, offices, that has to be disposed of somewhere. It can't all be recycled.
Thank you.
Terry, quick question to the applicant. I want to clear on that. So does Farmers Branch offer curbside recycling, yes or no?
No, Farmers Branch does not have But let me add that
If he's trying to speak, we can't hear. If you have a question, I'd like you to come up to the microphone, please.
Farmers Branch does have a recycling program, but if we're talking specifically about Camelot Landfill, the volume of waste that goes into that landfill from Farmers Branch is a very small part of that waste. Most of the waste that goes into that landfill comes from other cities and communities in the North Texas area. So you could take all of the Farmers Branch waste out of Camelot Landfill and it wouldn't make a significant impact on the volume of waste that's disposed of there.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you guys, I'm Ron Simmons, and I want to ask you a question, but I want to let you guys know, you answer my question, is this process over?
No.
This is not over, so you do not give up. We are not going to give up. The city is not going to give up. First not going to give up. Then not going to give up. So you don't give up. You stay with us, and we will get this thing done.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is John Grant. I'm a councilman in the City of Lewisville. Now, I know the answer to these, but I want them to know the answer to these. Now, you mentioned some numbers before, so we're going to hash over them just real quick. Street level is at 460 feet, mean sea level, correct? Roughly? The street number, about 460 feet. Okay, right? Now, currently, the highest point of the landfill right now is about 518 feet, is that correct?
Approximately there, it's permitted to go to 523.
Right, it's permitted to go 523. That is, if the expansion does not get approved, it's going to stop at 523, and then you're just going to fill up your land to 523. Is that correct?
The applicant will, yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. Yes. All right. To the applicant, if we do not have the expansion, how long will that landfill be in operation until you get to 523 feet filled up? Roughly. I mean, it's hard to tell.
Approximately 15 years.
15 more years. Okay, so that landfill is going to be there 15 more years. Now, 460 feet to 523 feet is roughly 63 feet. That's a 6-story building. High, okay? Now, I think, I'm going to ask you this because you might not know the answer, but I'm sure you think that a 6-story high pile of trash is tall enough. With the expansion, it's going to go another 200 feet, 202 feet, which is another 20-story building height on top of where it can go now. Correct?
Well, no,
If 10 stories is the floor, if 10 feet is the floor.
it's not a building, it's a landfill.
No, but we all understand heights by looking at stories and buildings. So, I think, and I'm going to make it
202 feet would be the approximate height of a 20-story building.
Okay. Now, do you understand how tall this monster is going to be? All right, so they got that down. So we know that if we do not get the expansion, it's going to be in service for up to 15 years. Next question. You almost answered the question earlier, and I hope everybody got it. It's not just Farmers Branch trash to go in there, but you own the landfill. Do you, Farmers Branch,
sell the services to dump trash here from other cities and organizations? Yes.
The other entities that bring waste there pay to dispose of their waste.
Okay, so this is a money-making thing for Farmers Branch?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's a business, okay? All right. I just want people to know all the facts, what they're hearing here, and you're answering everything truthfully. I appreciate that from a lawyer. I do. That's a joke. I really truly believe in the end of this question, I'm not making comments because I want them to be in the formal so that they'll be recorded. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood how tall this was going to be and how long this was going to be, that this isn't over, there will still be a trash chute there. I also, in defense of Farmers Branch, and this is a comment because it just came up about the recycling. What is the population of Farmers Branch?
I don't know, I think it's somewhere around 30,000.
30,000.
30 somewhere.
Okay. Let me put that recycling thing in perspective. In Lewisville, we're going to be looking at recycling for apartments. We have more people in apartments than Farmers Branch has in the whole city. Okay? Our apartments has the same recycling program that they have. Take your trash, take it to a recycling center. Being curbside service is misleading. It's convenient, but it's misleading. Let's be fair. Thing is, we think that, do we not think that a 6-story tall mountain of trash is tall enough? That's what it comes down to. Thank you.
Good evening. I am a resident of Coyote Ridge, and I have a couple of questions, not just directed to you, because I think that in order for us to get to a solution, we have to all be part of the solution. So we can't expect one man, one process to right the ship for us. But I do have one question for you, sir, and that is, what percentage of the trash in Camelot is Farmers Branch?
I don't know the answer. I will tell you that it's...
But is that the only
less than
landfill that you
10%.
guess? What's that?
It's less than 10% of the
Less than,
baseline.
and I think that that's an important point. Raise your hand if you don't generate any trash. That's what I thought. What I think we should think about here as smart, concerned citizens is what are the other solutions that we need to be thinking about that may be longer term, but that we need to put some energy and some muscle behind, and we need to ask our city officials to support and to look into other solutions. And believe you me, there are solutions that are very, very near in. The technologies exist, and they are here. And what I would ask of you is to write to or have discussions with your city representatives, because there are renewable energy companies that can set up manufacturing plants and facilities located near landfills today. And they are landfill replacement companies. If you think that I'm smoking something, I assure you that I'm not. Just talk to the city of Dallas, and if you have been paying any attention to their flow control issue that came up at the beginning of the year, where do you think the city of Dallas's trash goes? It comes down here to us. When I bought my home, I knew that there was a landfill nearby. You probably did too. So your trash goes somewhere. Farmers Branch's trash has to go somewhere. And what I would like to submit is a question back to all of us. And that is, let's put more pressure, suggestion, and thought around what we can do with our own trash. Thank you.
I do not live near the landfill. I live about 10 minutes walking distance from here. However, I am a landscape architect registered in the state of Texas, currently working on a soccer complex that's sitting on top of a landfill. So my question has to do with land use. I know you can't look 40 years into the future when the dump is full and done, but at 200 or 300 feet above what is kind of our finished grade, you're not putting a soccer complex up there. You're not putting a park. You can't grow trees because of the clay cap. It's going to be a big grass pimple on the top that everybody's going to see. I'm just kind of asking, what kind of land use could you do with that? We're not building on it. And I'm not being funny, but you could do a BMX park or a ski slope. And really, that's not probably going to happen. So it's going to be wasted land. The higher you go, the less likely you are to be able to put something on there. Has Farmers Branch thought that far into future land use of that land? Otherwise, you're making it non-usable.
Well, Farmers Branch doesn't have a specific end-use plan for this landfill at this point, but I can tell you from my experience, landfills have been used for various things.
Correct.
Trees actually can be planted on landfills.
In strategic places, which means you're not going to have a park-like setting. You're going to have a big grassy area, and as I said, we're working right now on a landfill, and yes, we've got trees on the edge, trees in specific spots, but it's open. Not because it's a soccer complex, but because we can't plant trees on the top of that clay liner. So you're not going to have a pretty thin tree-lined, big giant hill that everybody goes, oh, I never knew we had a hill. We won't know.
Well, there are ways that you can plant trees on the side slopes and top slopes of landfills. That can be
All
done.
the
It's
clay
been done in a lot of
cap on the
places.
edges, correct.
So it can be done. I don't think skiing would really work, primarily because of geography. But there have been a lot of parks built on closed landfills.
200 some odd feet up in the air. How are you going to get parking? How are you going to make it accessible? I'm just saying those are things to think about in the future, because if that land is unusable in the future, you're not collecting the gas to, once the landfill's done, you're going to set up an energy plant to then come back and pump that somewhere into the city, so it's reusable that way. So I'm just thinking in the future, because you're probably, like I said, not going to drive a big old road up to the top of that thing to put a soccer complex or a park area, although you might have great plane viewing up there. So just something to think about in the future. Are you making that land usable or unusable? My opinion, unusable. That's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Edgar from Lewisville. I have a few questions. You said you were here to represent Farmers Branch, and then you said you live in Austin.
Yes.
Sounds like, and you're an attorney?
Yes.
And are you with a firm?
Yes.
Which firm is that?
McElroy, Sullivan, Miller, Weber, and Homestead.
And so do you guys do a lot of like TCEQ work, or you or your firm? I mean, what's the?
Yes, we do.
So we'll see you in the contested case hearing most likely?
I hope so.
As to the contested case hearing, I listened to the introductions and went kind of quick, but you four are the staff, employed staff at TCEQ. And so what you're telling us is that you go through this application and the engineers look to say, well, if it's built this way, it'll comply with all these regs, and the lawyers look at it and say, well, this is complying with the regs, and they interpret it right. And so you'll get done with your process, and then you will hand it to, assuming there's no contested case, you hand it to the executive director, and most likely that gets approved. Is that the way that works?
Yes, an uncontested MSW permit generally is delegated to the executive director.
Okay, and what kind of discretion does the executive director have to say, you know, that may meet the technical requirements, but it's too close to sports fields or neighborhood?
Your question is, what discretion does the executive director have on land use and siting?
On this type of permit, whether it's...
So these people work for the executive director, they do the review, they make the recommendation, who's ultimately their boss.
Right.
And they say, we recommend that the executive director could personally look at the application and disagree and tell them to go back and work on it, but if it's uncontested.
So there's been a lot of discussion around what's the point of being here. What I'm trying to figure out is, does at some point, some office or commission within the TCEQ have the discretion to say, you know, it meets these requirements, but under this other part of the statute, we think it's bad in general for public health?
So they'll make the recommendation, let's say that it meets all the technical requirements, they make the recommendation that the application should move forward. That was what Diane was talking about, that second notice, the notice of application and preliminary decision. That comes with a final 30-day comment period. All the comments received get responded to. That document goes out, and it says, here's our, doing a response to comment could change their opinion of whether or not to issue the application. It can change how some parameters of the draft permit, but ultimately to play this out, they say, here's our written response to the comments. We think the application should still move forward. If you disagree, you have 30 days from the date of this document to request a contested case hearing. All hearing requests are set on our commissioner's agenda. The 3 commissioners are appointed by the governor. They hire the executive director. These people work for the executive director. All hearing requests are set on the commissioner's agenda. It's the 3 commissioners that make the decision whether or not they disagree.
So my question, though, is about the standard, right? I would not expect that they would have the authority to go in and say, you know, it may meet the technical requirements of our regulations, but it's bad for public health. What I'm asking is, what part of the TCEQ, to what part of the TCEQ are our concerns relevant? Is it the commission? Is it the ALJ? Like where?
At every level, because your concerns could impact their opinion of whether or not to issue the permit. If they still, even though you put your concerns out and they don't change the permit, or they say, yes, it should move forward, then the public should record. Their next step is for them to, we disagree with the executive director's recommendation. You 3 commissioners, we disagree. These are our issues. We want a contested case hearing. The commissioners review that. They make a decision whether or not to send you to the hearing. You bring it goes to the hearing with the judge. You express those. The judge writes an opinion. The permit should be issued. The permit should be denied. It should be issued with these changes. That comes back to our 3 commissioners. And then they review what happened at SOA and what all the parties, their opinion of what happened at the hearing, and then they ultimately make a decision whether or not they agree with the executive director to issue the permit, whether or not they agree with the citizens to either change the parameters of the permit or to deny it.
Okay.
It's
Next
an
question.
administrative process. It's written out in statute and rule.
I got it. But so the next question is, how does the application for an amendment or an expansion differ from opening a new landfill?
It's basically the same. A major amendment is basically, the application is basically the same as a new landfill application.
Okay. I'm not Twittering.
Am I saying that correct? Yes, you agree? I'm asking the 2 engineers.
That's fine. That's good. Thanks. I'm not Twittering. I have my notes. And so you mentioned that the application is available online. I looked everywhere and I couldn't find it. I mean, I realized it's big, but I didn't see it.
If you go to the TCEQ's website, in our search button, there's a link. They're required by our rule it's a link on our webpage, but it's on a server that they provide.
So we see all of that.
Correct.
I just didn't find it. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And then you mentioned that the contested case hearing would be brought by a statutorily or regulatorily defined affected person. Is that the phrase you used?
Correct.
Can you give us what that definition is?
I'll let Diane do that. She's probably got it right there.
Yeah, so there's 2 other things I wanted to clarify from one of the earlier comments also. The executive director's staff does take public comment very seriously. And we do consider it, and changes are made to things such as the site operating plan, which is a great deal of the activities that go on at the site, things of this nature, when there are concerns. And when there are concerns, we look at ways within the regulations to make the permit the best that it can be. And the question you asked about discretion, I believe that at various places along the way, when we actually are all standing in the shoes of the executive director, the persons who are putting on the meeting tonight work in the commissioner's cluster. Those of us here standing as the executive director. When the executive director makes a decision that is not particularly supported in statute and rule because the applicant has met with the need, then the commission is subject to the same type of objection from the applicant that it would be from the public. And if you were looking for that answer, I'm not sure for it. Okay, so what does it take to be an affected person?
Can you hold the microphone a little bit?
Texas Water Code, section 5.556, little c is in Charles. You have to have a personal justiciable interest, and that would be that you're affected in a way that is dissimilar from the way that the general public is affected. That's the definition.
For these types of permits, is living in close proximity to does that count?
And then that is tied to, whether your affected person is tied to whether or not issues and concerns that are relevant and material to the agency's considerations about the application, things within the agency's jurisdiction that it looks at for this permit application. If it's relevant and material to that, and it would affect the person, and that could be an entity, business entity, or the person who's commenting. So if there's a relevant and material issue, and it would affect the person who's requesting the hearing in a way different than the general public.
So there's a threshold decision made whether the individual that's seeking the contested case is an affected person? Is that
Yes.
So
The
it
first
would be different
decision
than the
is
actual based on what's
affect-
contractual.
Yes, the first decision is whether they're affected. And then if the commission finds someone is affected, they refer the application to SOA for a contested case hearing.
And that's so one affected person can bring a contested case?
Yes.
You don't have verification?
Correct.
Okay, that's all, thank you.
One affected person is the equivalent of 500. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Could you lift the microphone up just a little bit, because you're the tallest gentleman we've had here tonight.
Oh, my daddy was glad to hear that. I'm living in Carrollton, and the name's Bill Robbie, and most of us, I suspect, are familiar with the lead smelter that closed down in Dallas, and how it moved away. And after they were gone, the children living near the lead smelter, after it was closed, were affected by the lead levels in their bloodstream. This affected their development of their intelligence. Is there any reason for concern about young infants living with parents and downwind from this larger landfill? Should we be concerned about adverse effects?
Do we have any information of adverse health effects from this landfill?
As was mentioned during the initial comments, there is groundwater monitoring at the site, and there is corrective action groundwater at the site, and that's the purpose. The purpose of that piece of this part of regulation and the management of that site is to prevent adverse impacts to human health and the environment. Specifically in terms of, when you said downwind, specifically in terms of, we don't know of air emissions. We don't have any knowledge of air emissions or alleged air emissions or pollution from this air pollution from this facility that would have adverse health effects. There is a separate part of the agency, the Office of Air, that controls all of the air authorizations, and this facility is required to also be in good standing with the Office of Air and have all the proper air authorizations.
Thank you. So yes, ma'am. While she's walking up, so we have 8 people standing in line. After the gentleman in the suit, we're going to, that's behind you, just look. We're going to stop question and answer. We're going to take a break and go into formal comment because I believe I have 40, 50, if not 60 people that want to make formal comment, which will take more than 2 hours, I believe. So after this gentleman, we're going to stop to take a break and go into formal comment. So yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Chris Thatcher, and I live in Coyote Ridge. And I live in Phase 1, which backs up almost directly to the DFW landfill. And I was one of the people who bought a home and didn't know it was a landfill. So we're out there. I don't know if it's there or not, but we're out there. There are a couple of just pretty simple questions I'd like to ask you. You, in your efforts to make this expansion of extra acreage less egregious to us, you explained that part of what you were going to use the 100 acres for was for wood waste. Can you explain exactly what that is? Does it emit smells and so on?
Well, it would be storage and processing of wood waste like tree limbs and that sort of thing. That would be most likely ground up in a tub grinder and then probably used for landscaping mulch at landfill or by the city in parks and that sort of thing. It's a way to take materials that otherwise might go into a landfill and use up landfill space, take those materials that are usable for something else and process them and put them to some beneficial use.
So do you use water in this process?
Well, a lot of times there is some water because the incoming material is wet, but you don't want water in the process. The drier, the better.
I moved here from the Pacific Northwest and lived very near many wood pulp manufacturing facilities, and the smell is horrible.
No, it's nothing like that. There's not a chemical process that's used. We're not making paper here. We're making mulch.
Okay. You also mentioned that you're now gathering the gas and turning it into electricity. I assume that Farmers Branch also sells that electricity to somebody?
The electricity is put into the grid and is sold, and I will have to confess to you that I don't know what the economic arrangements there are between the city and the entity that operates the waste-to-energy plant. Farmers Branch doesn't operate that plant. We just supply the landfill gas to it.
For free?
That's what I said. I don't know what the economics of it are. I don't know who gets how much money from all of that. Now, obviously, from Farmers Branch's standpoint, there is some savings by virtue of having that gas go to someplace for beneficial use.
So does that mean that Farmers Branch residents have lower electric rates?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with Farmers Branch's electric rates.
Okay then, moving right along. I hate to beat the height issue to death, but many of us here are very familiar with how high the DFW landfill is currently. And with your added expansion at its maximum, how much higher than DFW, or would it be the same height?
DFW, if I recall, is authorized for a maximum height of, I think, an elevation of 623 feet. And this permit application for Camelot is requesting a maximum elevation of 725 feet. So it's 102 feet taller than the authorized height at DFW.
So that gives us really kind of a perspective on what we can expect. Okay. Let's see, I think I have something else here. On the water testing, you mentioned that you have wells every so often that test the water. Coming from the Northwest, where we dismantled a nuclear facility because it generated waste that got into the rivers in the Northwest. I'm surprised that the whole Trinity River downstream isn't affected by this. It's got to be. I mean, both dumps come so close to the river area. It has got to affect this water downstream and currently here. And, you know, we oftentimes think about, you know, our water goes right into a facility here that the Trinity water supplies, our drinking water. So many times, you know, you have to wonder. I have to agree with the gentleman who said, you know, 2 football fields apart. Well, what's going on between there? And by the time you notice that there has been contamination in water, is it really, truly not too late? That's probably because you're not drinking that water, but okay. Well,
You know, you're raising a point that not only do Lewisville and Carrollton get drinking water that comes from the Trinity River, so does Farmers Branch. That's the source of Farmers Branch's drinking water. So that's an issue that is obviously very important to Farmers Branch, just like it is to everybody else who uses water out of the Trinity River. And let me point out a couple of things about the groundwater monitoring system and what's been found there. First of all, there's absolutely never been any indication of any liquids or waste material migrating out of the landfill. When groundwater scientists look at the results of sampling and testing in groundwater monitoring wells, they look to see what particular compounds show up and what those levels are. There are various indicator parameters that show up pretty easily if you have leachate, which is liquid material coming out of a landfill that's gotten into groundwater. That's never happened here. The parameters that have been identified in low levels in a few of these monitor wells are parameters that are well known to be associated with landfill gas. That's what the source of these constituents is. So what we've done is to go in and deal with the source of that material, which is the gas inside the landfill, put in the collection system to keep that material inside the landfill. And with regard to your question about spacing of groundwater monitor wells, one thing that Farmers Branch did when these constituents were detected in groundwater in some of these monitor wells was to put in additional wells in that same area so that we had closer spacing and could observe what was going on a much more localized basis there. And we have not had indications that affected groundwater is outside that area where we put those additional wells.
okay. I just one more question. The fellow before me was going on about what criteria you use to make your decision. And I think, to me, the basis of his inquiry was, is the application approved if it merely meets all of the technical requirements and current legislative rules for this type of facility, period?
The recommendation would be to issue the permit if it met the rules and requirements.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. You're going to have to step closer to the microphone.
Is that close? Can you tell me if you've done any hypothetical appraisals on the home to show us what the environmental obsolescence impact is on the homes that are being affected by this? And if you have, what the negative impact will also be as the dump gets higher? Because it's not only the homeowners losing, it's also the city for tax dollars.
We don't have the authority to take the value of homes into consideration. We do not have that authority.
So you guys don't have a clue of how much money you guys are going to lose for tax dollars?
We do not have the authority to take that into consideration.
Wow. Okay, well now my second question is more for the attorney, I think, is if the liner leaks and that will affect a lot of people's values of homes, there, to me, seems like there would be a lawsuit there. Because you're saying right here, it's not gonna leak, and you're approving it. So the homeowner, now that it's leaked and it's affected our land, trust me, there'll be lawsuits. I'm in the business, trust me. Is there a question for me? I'd like to know the legal. Is Carrollton or Lewisville, are they gonna handle the legalities? It's gonna be suing Farmers Branch for if the liner lease is gonna affect our land values? I mean, it will, and I can't believe you guys haven't.
Diane, would that be a civil court?
There certainly are, there's many complex relationships in America, as you know, different ways that the parties can interact in litigation and to get redress for harms that they allege that they've incurred, and certainly civil court is one of the ways that would be.
You guys would approve this knowing ahead of time that there's a good possibility that this could leak and we know that it's going to affect our values? Because I can tell you right now how much it affects it. And, you know, if you get a general appraiser that can go to, you know, maybe Houston or Austin and really find where, when a dump gets that high, how bad it affects the values. The environmental effect, the obsolescence on it is amazing.
I believe you're speaking about the appraisal value of the property, the real property and the value. And the legislature sets the jurisdiction for TCEQ, and that jurisdiction does not include the consideration of the property value of the surrounding homes.
That's it.
Who does consider it?
Yes.
My name is Margo Diamond. I live in Carrollton and Oak Hills. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, we already discussed early on that this won't be the highest landfill, but I want to understand, is the proposed height of the landfill taken into consideration with other landfills of similar height? One, the tremendous population growth since the landfill first was approved in '79, built in the '80s. I moved here in '98, and now the growth of the area. Also, are other landfills that are going to be of this height or yard of this height, do they have a proximity to a water source like we have traditionally in the river? If you don't know now, I just think that should be something that should be under consideration, because it's not just how tall is the landfill, it's is the landfill in a densely populated area, is it affecting water? And then related to that question is, because we're here tonight and plans are already underway for the approval of this process, what plans, this I guess is to our officials, what plans do we have maybe to move additional waste instead of making this landfill taller, going to a more northern county, north of Denton County, or going to Wise County, to a place that is not so populated and not so close to the Trinity River?
That question is definitely for your local officials. I think the first question is, so this, correct me, they've asked for this major expansion, and when you look at the application with regard to the nearby population in the buffer zones, I think it's more, what is it that we take into, what are the requirements on the buffer zones for a landfill?
Buffer zone requirements are that the landfill must have at least 125 feet of property outside of the waste disposal footprint.
So it's not related to population, it's just the length of area of land around it.
I don't believe that we have specific requirements that address population density. There are certain things with proximity to airports, wetlands, things like that. But I don't believe actual population density is part of that.
Just the buffer zone.
Okay, that's the first thing that came to mind, because I see the growth in this area, and it's a very densely populated area.
Thank you.
There are currently 188 landfills that are active, roughly about that. Less than 10% have a height of up to 200 feet. This would be one of the highest landfills in the state of Texas.
sure I'm understanding the process that you would explain. So right now you're in your technical review of the application. And at this point, any persons, organization, groups can file a contested, what was that again? To contest the application, is that what I heard?
A contested case hearing
Yes,
may be requested anytime
from now till it's approved?
until the end of the
Okay.
public comment period. And at the end of the public comment period, we will publish a response to comments.
Okay,
And we will invite hearing, excuse me, correctly, but we will invite hearing requests, particularly at that notice of application preliminary decision at the end of technical review. And it will say, we will consider all hearing requests received from the beginning until the end, but at that time we will say, this is your deadline for requesting contested case hearing.
Okay.
If your issues haven't been addressed, tell us your relevant material issues, and if you're affected, and request a hearing.
Okay, so, and I'm just trying to understand what you're saying here. So when the 40 people that want to make their questions on the books or whatever, that's part of this, what you were just talking about. So what is it, like 1 week past that, then that's the point you have to make it contested? Is there any timeline for your project process?
Making a comment during the second part of the meeting, a formal comment orally, is the equivalent of submitting something in writing. So you could do it tonight orally, had many people that indicated they wanted to do that. Some people have already left, a lot of people have already left.
Right, I was hoping to say something before they came up here.
So
my understanding
here, I'm going to do the time frame for you. Dwight, application is still under technical review. You've formally asked the applicant to give you more information, and when is that due back to you?
I believe that's due back in the middle of November.
So, okay, for example purposes only, let's say November 15th, the applicant answers all his questions. And they are satisfied with the application. And they say, this is ready to go. We think a draft permit should be issued. That will trigger the applicant to publish notice. They publish notice, let's say on December 1. That's the notice of application of preliminary decision. That comes with a 30-day comment period. So that ends on January 2nd. During that 30 days, you guys can ask for another public meeting because now you have the draft permit. Let's say you wait till December 31st to ask for a public meeting. Public meeting, and there's a significant interest, so we have a meeting. Public meeting notice is done basically a month in advance. We have that, by the nature of the public meeting, automatically extends the comment period to the night of the public meeting.
Excellent.
So you have public meeting on February 1. That's the close of the comment period. All comments received from the beginning of the process through that evening orally are gathered up. Staff has a goal of 60 days to write a written response to public comment. So now we're March, April. The response to comment document gets mailed out to everyone, and on it says, here's the answer to all your questions. We still want to move forward. This is just for example purposes. If you disagree that the executive director issuing this permit, you have 30 days from the date of this document to request a contested case hearing. Now you're at May. All hearing requests received from the beginning of the process until that point then are set on our commissioner's agenda. Our commissioner's agenda is just like the city council, it's subject to the Open Meetings Act. It takes 2 to 3 months to get on agenda. So now that's in July, and then now the commissioners review the hearing requests. They grant your hearing, you get referred over to State Office of Administrative Hearings. That typically takes 6 months. Come back to the commissioners, get on their agenda, and the decision is made this time next year.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So if everyone that's left sitting in this auditorium submitted a formal contest to this application, they would get their time on the books that you were talking about for their hearing?
If you submit something in writing, if you make a formal oral comment tonight, if on the sign-in sheet you indicated you wanted to be put on the mailing list, you will get, if this application moves forward, you'll get that second notice. You'll get on the mailing list, and as this moves forward, you'll get something delivered to you at home explaining the process as it plays out.
Okay, excellent. And then also, so if the gentleman from Farmer, I forgot his name, I'm sorry.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Ryan. So in this process, I know she was pulling dates out hypothetically. So in the process, they've sent you back a letter and you're getting ready to submit your answers to them. Is there a timeline that you have in your mind that you want to submit those answers back to them?
Well, we actually have a deadline.
Oh, good. What is that deadline?
I think it's about November 15th, sometime in the middle of November.
Okay, so it's not before November 15th.
And there's an opportunity for another round of questions after that.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Hi, mine isn't really a question, just comments, and I was already in line. And I'm a bad speaker, so bear with me. I was today driving home, and we were passing the dump, and there were about 400 or 500 just birds, the white birds, just swarming around on the landfill. And like, I almost threw up just at that. And then there were hundreds in the sky. It was crazy. And then today it was 63 degrees outside, and you could smell the dump. Like, it was really bad. And normally you can only smell that when it's like 105 or higher. So that's just like, And then also, we moved here from South Lake about 7 years ago, and we lived in Coyote Ridge, right? Yeah, we lived in Coyote Ridge, and we didn't move there because of the dump. You could see it and you could smell it. So we moved to Castle Hills because you couldn't. And so now it's like y'all are wanting to build that up. That's going to decrease the value of everyone's home just everywhere. So, and also, last point, this is my future that it affects, and it's also like my kids, and so it bothers me, so, and that's it. Thank you.
Hi, I never come to one of these things. I lived in Coyote Ridge for about 7 years, and I moved to Castle Hill. And I could see that there isn't that many people from Castle Hills here because they aren't aware of what's going on in the community, with the landfill. I mean, we all know there's a landfill by Coyote Ridge. But now it's going to affect the Castle Hills community with the height and the smell. And I'm wondering, as a citizen, if I would say petition all my neighbors, say within 2 weeks, with the PTA, I get a petition going. Would it change anything? Would it stop that thing from going through?
You have to, they base their decision on whether or not the application meets the rules and statutes that are set out, so the rules and the requirements. So a petition of 500 names, 1,000 names,
thousands of names would not matter.
That's not what's taken into consideration. Does the application, is it protective of human health and the environment? Does it meet the rules and the requirements?
Okay. So it doesn't matter that the property value for
But another way to look at that is one person with very good technical questions has the same amount of power as 1,000.
Yeah, but still, am I going to be able to change, say if I go on the internet, make an effort?
If your petition brought up technical issues that we can take into consideration.
Not technical,
we don't have the authority to deny it based on the number of names. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to follow up with the representative for Farmers Branch and find out exactly what Councilmember Andonian was referring to, the lengthy discussions that have been had with respect to the infraction on the groundwater.
You're talking prep
at the council meetings, and why that seems to be such a concern, because to me that is a public health issue.
Well, I think the meetings that he's talking about are the quarterly meetings of a landfill committee that is made up of representatives from Farmers Branch Landfill, from the DFW Landfill, and from the Indian Creek Carrollton Homeowners Association. I think those those are the primary participants in those meetings. They have quarterly meetings at which issues related to the two landfills are discussed, questions are asked, information is provided.
So why is there seemingly such a big concern about infraction on the groundwater? Whether it's landfill gas or what? Gas to me is matter, and that has particles that can contaminate other types of matter.
Well, and what happens, the mechanism that happens here that has resulted in the constituents that have been found in the groundwater monitor well samples is dissolution into the water of some of these constituents. Two of these constituents are primarily are gaseous materials that can dissolve into water. If that happens, it can get into the monitor wells in a couple of different ways. One is if that dissolution occurs down in the soil and the water moves into the monitoring well, that when you pull a sample of water out of that well and test it, you can find the constituent there. The other thing that can happen is that if the gas moves through the subsurface as gas and enters the groundwater monitor well through the perforations in the pipe on the side of the well that are there to let water in, but obviously gas can also get in there. Gas can enter what's called the headspace, which is the area above the water inside the well that's usually filled with air. If you have some gas that gets in there, it can then dissolve and go into solution in the water that's already present in the groundwater monitoring well. And then when you take a sample, you find that constituent in the water.
Well, it seems to me that with the landfill that's already been approved, that we all have lived with and has already impacted our quality of life, possibly our public health, because it has been discussed in the landfill committee, Farmers Branch committee, all these committees that have been meeting. To me, it seems pretty irresponsible to go ahead and put down 200 feet more of waste on top of an area that is already indicating some level of concern with respect to possibly this gaseous material dissolving into the groundwater. And I do believe and I know there's been studies that you all have approved the engineer reports, but apparently there are already some concerns with the current landfill. Is that true? Are there concerns with the current ground landfill as it stands right now with respect to any kind of contamination at all?
Well, I can tell you that anytime we find constituents that aren't normally present in groundwater or soil in samples taken from groundwater monitor wells or gas probes, there are concerns.
To me, that's a big concern. Am I not right? That's a big concern. That's a big concern that there are already concerns, and that you're talking about putting 200 feet more high up of waste on this landfill. That's a big concern. My second question is, as far as the committee here and who you report to, the executive director, what is his name and who is he appointed by? Or I'm not sure on all my TCEQ.
His name is Zach Kovar.
Okay, who is he appointed by?
The three commissioners who are appointed by the governor.
Zach, how do you spell his name?
Z-A-K C-O-V-A-R.
C-O-V-A-R. And I would ditto what soon-to-be council member Simmons is going to said, right? This is not over, so we let our, I guess our governor know how we feel about this, right? And it does affect our quality of life. It does affect our public health.
Thank you.
Good evening, Neil Ferguson, Lewisville City Council. I had some questions of my own, but I was also handed a question. I would like to read it. Would the parties here care to explain to the people who have come tonight, in order for them to provide evidence for a contested hearing that would prove that the expansion should be disallowed, what would you need to see?
You would need to bring up issues that show that they don't meet the rules and the requirements, that they have a technical deficiency in their application.
How are we supposed to know that? We're not the engineer.
That's what you would have to do. And you, please don't yell from the audience. Sir.
Point of information, the City of Carrollton has retained counsel in Austin, we've retained experts, we are reviewing every page of these applications. And we are pointing out every possible technicality you can imagine on these and fighting it every step of the way. So we're not relying on you, the citizen, to come up with Regulation 9, Part Z, little I 2. We have experts that we have hired to take care of that.
That's really the answer they needed to hear. The City of Lewisville has also hired an attorney to contest this. People who have experience with these type issues to fight it. Because this is the only section in which you can respond to questions, I'll be speaking later, but I have a couple of questions that I wanted to hear answers to. These are directed to you, Mr. Ryan. In the Farmers Branch Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, what's often referred to as the CAFR. First of all, the city manager went to great lengths to point out that for 10 years running, they've received countless awards for the quality of their report, and they will be submitting it to receive an award again. In that CAFR, on page 49, it states that the anticipated life expectancy of the landfill is 29.5 years. Tonight, you said 15 years. At the rate we're going, it will be closed by the middle of next summer. What is the real number? And why is it shrinking? And what benefit is it to Farmers Branch to keep reducing this number back?
Well, I don't know that it's any benefit to Farmers Branch to reduce that number. And I will tell you that remaining years of capacity at a landfill can be a difficult thing to determine. What can be determined to a pretty high degree of accuracy is the remaining volume that's available in a landfill for waste disposal. A big variable in the operation of a landfill is the rate at which that capacity gets used up.
I understand that, but those calculations were in the CAFR when they came up with 29.5 years. And that was in January of this year.
Well, I can tell you that maybe somebody is doing calculations in different ways. I can tell you that, and there are various ways that landfill capacity is calculated and is estimated to be used in the future. There are some methodologies that don't allow for any sort of growth factor in the volume of waste that's going in there. TCEQ has an annual report that has to be submitted for every landfill in the state that has very specific methodologies that TCEQ requires to be used for calculating starting volume, end of year volume, capacity used during the year, and based on that, an estimation of how long that remaining capacity is going to last. So I guess what I would say to you is that you could look at the last several years' reports that get submitted for Camelot Landfill that show how much capacity has been used in each of those years. You could come up with your own estimates based on that if you'd like to for how much capacity will be used every year in the future. Plug in whatever sort of growth rate you think might be appropriate and come up with a remaining capacity. But like I said, that's obviously at some point that becomes a subjective estimate as opposed to the actual volume of remaining capacity that's an engineering calculation.
Well, in fact, the calculations you described are in the CAFR. It does use that very approach, and it arrived at 29 and a half years in a report that the city manager highly touted. So when I hear 15 years from you tonight, I have to say, I take that with a grain of salt. The credibility of that comment, I'd also like you to tell us, if this permit were approved, what is the anticipated life expectancy of this landfill before it's closed? And with that, I'll sit down and let you comment.
I will tell you that in the permit application, there are, I think, 2 different calculations of life expectancy based on, again, different assumptions about growth rates and incoming waste volumes. And I will tell you, I don't remember what the results of either one of those calculations were.
It's more than 100 years. Can you agree that?
I don't know what the results of the calculation.
It's more than 100 years.
Dwight has reviewed the application. What did you see?
Well, I don't want to argue with you about it. I believe the application says that with the amendment, it would add between 30 and 60 years, or from now would be 30 to 60 years. I believe.
Our experts think another one.
Sir?
The experts, his experts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was just saying what was in the application.
So we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to get into the formal portion of the meeting. Thank you.